Today on Grainger Talk, we're talking to Coach Branch and Coach Pardue about the 2004 state championship team, the team of the decade. So stay tuned.
And welcome back to another edition of Grainger Talk. I'm your host, Jamie Bozeman, here with Aiden Blackwell. Today we have the pleasure of sitting down and taking a look at the 2004 LaGrange High School Granger football team that was a back-to-back state champion. Today with us we have head coach Steve Pardue and defensive coordinator Donnie Branch. And also from then LaGrange Daily News and now BTV reporter Kevin Eckelberry. In the early 2000s, LaGrange High School was slated as a team of the decade under the leadership of Coach Pardue, where they captured state titles in 2001, 2003, and 2004. The early 2000s were produced teams to be remembered with some of the most dominant stretches in high school football history and LaGrange High School history. That senior class finished the year with a 55-2 overall record, capturing back-to-back state titles, and more importantly, putting LaGrange High School back on the map as it relates to high school football. So, Coach Pardue, Coach Branch, thank you guys for being here and talking about that 2004 state championship team.
Thank you.
Appreciate you having us.
Yes. First, Jamie, you also coached on this team, right?
I did. I had the privilege. Coach Pardue brought me in actually in 2002 as a freshman, ninth grade coach, where I spent 1 year, and then with the when Coach Tinker left after the end of that year, that left a vacancy at the varsity level. So Coach Pardue met with me over the summer, brought me in, and I had the privilege of then starting my varsity career with those guys and being mentored by Coach Branch as a defensive coordinator, serving with Coach Branch, Coach Crocker, and Coach Pickett on that defensive staff.
So I was at Auburn in 2004, and I was watching Scout.com videos of a linebacker from LaGrange High School. No clue I was going to be coming here, right? Trey Blackman, obviously. And Coach Pardue, Jamie and I were talking earlier about that 2004 team, but also it doesn't begin and end in 2004. You had developed a culture going back. Jamie was talking about 95, 96, but really that 2001 team, just you and Coach Branch developing that culture. What was it? How did you do it? How did you set up that program for success to become the program of the decade from 2000 to 2010?
You know, I'd be remiss if I didn't go back to 94, my first year as the head coach here. And you know, we had good support then, but I remember we'd go over and do an inter-squad. And our first inter-squad, we had two people there, a mom and dad and one of our players, you know. And to what it's grown into now and what Matt's taken it to, you know, is really impressive. But in that first senior class, that Marcus Blandenberg, who's coaching at I guess I'm showing my age now, he's got two seniors on the team, you know, but Marcus and J.R. Revere and DeMario Shank, Carlo Hurd, those guys they really loved football. Johnny Allen, Ashante Woodyard. And they kind of really started it, I felt like, you know, just the way they loved to play. And then the Bruce Thorntons and Dexter Murphys and Travis Dunlaps. And then we got into the 2000s. And, you know, 99, everybody forgets about 99. We went 2-8. Right. But, you know, we made a conscious decision to start a freshman quarterback and a bunch of sophomores, you know, and they went on to lead us to the 01 and then 03, you know, they kind of got the tutelage from those guys, right. You know. I mean, don't get me wrong, we were very talented, you know. We were so good defensively, and then, you know, Thad Todd, you know, people around here argue, and some of the old players tell me you go to the barbershop, you know, they argue different generations about who the best quarterback was. A lot right. of Rodney Hudson, who was unbelievable, Vince Sutton, some of the older guys, and to Blake Mitchell, and, you know, and Thad Todd's the only two-time state champion quarterback, you know, and Thad didn't have the gaudy numbers, but he really managed the ball game well and took care of the football. And, you know, and we tried to play, you know, just real football that, you know, we won a game 2-0 the year before right. in the playoffs, but we were so good defensively, you know, that you didn't have to take a lot of chances offensively. And I think that was the culture. And the kids, they love ball. Right. They love ball. I mean, you know, they were an easy good. They weren't always easy to corral all the time. You know, they had like to have a good time too, but they really loved football on the field. Man, they were so much fun and challenged each other. You know. So
that 2003 team wins the state championship, and Jamie was saying it was really fun. Like playing that year was just fun. Expectations were winning, but not state championship. And then you come back in 2004, and it's
Well, if I remember correctly, I don't know. We had just come off of the 2002 season, and I mean that was just a disappointment there in Screven County, and so many things. Coach Branch and I've talked about this numerous times, and just the different things that happened in that game. We're still up in that game and had an opportunity, and just the way that game kind of went kind of leaves a really bad taste in your mouth. But then coming into the summer, and Coach Pardue lays out our coaches' handbooks and things like that, and the question is just why not us? Why not us? Why can't we get this done? And that year was really fun. But, going into 2004, and I'll let Coach Pardue and Coach Branch kind of talk about this, but your preseason ranked number 1 going into the season. Your first game of the year is at Callaway Stadium against preseason ranked number 3 in 5A, and that's the Noonan Cougars, and there's a long-standing rivalry there of those old Grangers and between LaGrange and Noonan, and just what that game was going to do and how it set the stage for how that season was going to take shape. We also switch regions. We go from that Carrollton region with Carrollton, Cass, and all that to now Villa Rica and now going down to Columbus with, Columbus, Spencer, Shaw, Jordan, those kind of teams. So there's a lot of, things that were going on in that 2004, season that kind of was different than the 03, but yet was still, we knew we had a chance. We could just not screw it up, I guess, as you would say, Coach.
Well, I told you, Coach Trailer, we were going home that summer. Something was wrong with this car. I don't know. We lived in the same neighborhood, so I was getting a ride home, and we got in the car, and only he could do it. He looked at me real dead face and goes, "I hope we don't screw this up." So my best explanation is 03. I remember when we won, I actually physically pinched my legs, and this is real. And 04 is like, whew, all right, we got through that.
Right.
But we played a bunch of those defensive guys as sophomores, so when they came back, we were dominating defense their junior year, and then, of course, their senior year, and the way they played,
Well, they were a great combination of a group that was very talented, but really, really were very coachable. And sometimes they don't go hand in hand. And your best players are your hardest workers. That's how I would describe our 03 and 04 both. And those guys, our biggest job defensively in 04 was challenging. Like, they had to take the challenge. We challenged them every day that the scout team couldn't move the ball forward. They wanted to dominate. And, we belly flopped them if anything happened with the scout team. But they took it. They didn't make excuses. The norm is a lot of times kids, when they're pushed, when they're already good, they take it a little personal when you're like, hey, we're already winning. Why are you doing this? This group was the opposite. Like, they would do good, and we would say, that's really not good enough. And then, so that was the way it was all year. But they did. Steve's right. That group had a ton of fun. And I'm going to backtrack 1 minute into one thing that Steve said that people don't talk about, because LaGrange, how we don't make excuses. Those 90s teams with J.R. Revere and that group, it needs to be stated, they were in the highest classification in the state of Georgia. Those were state championship teams had we been where we should have been. But at that time, it wasn't time yet for us to come on and get where we were. But there's 2 or 3 state championships probably in baseball and football that might be out there. Those guys were playing Valdosta and all those guys, and we were winning. We were doing well, but they had different challenges, and they did lay the foundation for this other group.
So, Coach, if you could take and put like the preseason going into the summer of 04, knowing that in the fall we were, what we had coming back and the expectation for that particular team, like, how do you set up when you talk about the culture? You talked about the early 90s and things like that, the overall expectations and what you set forth for that team as far as coaches and then filtering down to players. Like, before we even get things going, before we play our first game, like, how do you set the stage for a team like that with so many expectations from the outside, from the media, from the fans here in LaGrange, from the coaching staff, from the school, all that involved, and like keep it under control?
Well, the coaching staff was really no issue at all, because, I always wanted all of our staff, like you, and you came on, you were the head coach of the outside linebackers. Donnie was the head coach of the defense and D-line coach. Croc was the head coach of everybody had their own group. I wasn't going to holler at you during the game. If I see something at practice I don't like, I'm going to say something to you. It amazed me when I see people hollering at coaches during the game. Did you not see them doing that during practice? That's when you should have got on to them, But But the kids, and again, these were, some ways they weren't, but as far as football, they were very mature. We didn't once we knew that they would really strike you. We didn't strike, but a little bit Monday and Tuesday was a pretty big day for us early in the season. But as that went on, we got away from it. But I thought we did a good job scheduling. Of course, when you've won 2 state championships, it's hard to find people to play you. So, but playing both Noonan and Westlake, that helps. I always said help find your warts. Where are my problems? I may not even know I have them, and then you play a good team and you find out. Because some of those teams we played later on weren't that good. Now, Shaw had a great team. That was a 1-2 matchup, and that's when I knew these guys are special. I mean, that game, and Charles Flowers, who ended up coaching at Troop, a friend of mine, he told me, the first play of the game, they had about a 250-pound fullback, and they were in a dive play, and kid ended up going to University of Miami, and Braxton Kelly cut him in half. And then the next play, they throw the bubble screen out there, and Trey hits him. And I'll be honest, I didn't see it in live. I was down the line from it. I'm on the headset with Coach Traylor, and he's going, I think he broke his neck. I'm serious. I think he broke his neck. I really think he broke his neck. But, and Charles said when that play he said the game was over. We went up winning 37-10.
So they scored right before half.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, really, I'd like to say when you called me to the show, it's funny. I was just thinking, D, because I remember we hired a new coach back in the 90s one time. We won a big game, and he's like, what are y'all going to do? I was like, we're going to watch film and start getting ready for the next one. He said, y'all don't celebrate? I said, yeah, seasons. I said, 20 years from now we can celebrate. So I guess it's 20 years from now. So looking back last night, though, this team scored 533 points and only gave up 86, which were both records for LaGrange High School in 15-game season. So they were really balanced on both sides. We're in 03. We weren't very good on offense, during the regular season. We struggled, we played such great defense. We got to the Dome, and we had a couple plays, and I overheard Coach Brand say, "Where'd this offense come from?" And they went on down to Peach and continued to play good offense. So that kind of that was part of our growth right there too, as an offense side of the ball. But again, man, they were just fun guys to coach. They were because the one thing I was the most probably worried about was losing Wesley Woodyard. And not because of his play on the field, but just his leadership. Right. Yeah, and we had a bunch of guys that stepped up and took over, though. Travis Hart probably doesn't get the credit for the great high school football player he was, because we had so many guys, But Travis, like Donnie, I remember Travis had a tooth he had to get extracted during the season. We're like, hey, if we could just put him on the field and let him make all the calls – then we could take him off and play with 10. We'd have just as good a chance, because he was so smart in getting us in the right defense. And, again, those kids, you could challenge them mentally and physically, and they'd usually respond.
I think that speaks to the culture that y'all as coaches developed. And we've talked about, we mentioned Trey, Braxton, Travis Hart. Who are some of those unsung names that, the Rudies on the team that we all grew up? And you had one, Jamie, too. You were on top.
We got Corey Gerald for one. He wasn't a Rudy, though. He was an unblockable defensive lineman.
But he wasn't a prospect kind of guy.
Right.
But he was an unbelievable high school football player.
He really was.
Well, and when I think about, and I was always on the defensive side of things, and the one guy that just kind of keeps coming to mind just because I've talked to some people that I think are going to be here this weekend. On the offensive line, we're sitting there running wing 10. You got our guards, and they weren't bigger than a minute, and you got people like Rick Spivey, and Rick just, he had an integral role in that offensive scheme and all of that. And, he's passed away. He passed away from cancer. So people like that, like what they meant. People, maybe they get overshadowed by, like JP or Marshall, Shepard or DeMario Ford.
And Justin probably doesn't get the credit he deserves either. He was starting running back on back-to-back state championships. DeMario going over when Kelly got hurt and playing in the secondary. Kelly Reed and Rico Cameron were both really good players for us in the back end. I mean, it was it was just a special football team.
John Sher.
John Sher, outside linebacker with Travis Tucker on the other side, so.
Yeah. Travis, you get beat out at quarterback, we move you to defense.
Correct.
And shoot, he has a great year and then comes back and has a great year the next at playing quarterback. But it really was. I remember Spivey, Rick, when he came, and I've told his mom and dad this story, so I don't mind telling it. They came and they moved here. I think he was a freshman or sophomore maybe, and never played football. He was a little wrestler. That's what he looked like, And I said, yeah, man, we'd love to have you. And he came out and played and everything. Then the senior year, he hurt his neck a little bit. And I'll never forget. It's like on a Tuesday or Wednesday. I said, Rick, there's a chance you may not be able to play, and I never thought I'd care. But he had gotten good enough that we wanted him in the game, and he would fight you and was really, really, and those are the kind of guys I think win state championships. I mean, because, we go down to Peach County and the Washington counties, they're going to have those great players too, but it's those maybe second level guys who's got the best of those,
Right.
and our guys were really good football players for sure.
There's another one that we hadn't mentioned that to me is like Aiden said, the culture, and that's DJ Stafford.
Right.
Because DJ Stafford was unbelievably good, but he was a 10th grader. And to say that, like he came in there and, we didn't know if he's going to be a rule follower and do what he needed to do. But, I kind of turned him over to the group. And the Braxton Kellys of the world, those guys took him under their wing. And it was really the best year he had when he was a sophomore. And a lot of it just had to do with those guys just pushed him. And he accepted it. And he was, like say, it was nothing Rudy about him. He was a great player. Right. But he was a great player. He was gifted. But that season, those guys they pushed him. And he allowed me to push him as well. And he got yelled at a whole bunch that year. But he took it, and it was because Braxton got yelled at all year too. And he took it. It was kind of that group. It was a very good culture.
So in talking just really quickly, I mean, we mentioned 03, 01 and 03. In 03, we could probably go back and we can talk about how there's that turning point game or that midseason kind of deal where we could say, hey, this might actually happen for us. In 04, it was really different. And is there a time, I will go to you first, Coach, defensively, where there might have been that midseason game or that situation midseason where we kind of faced some adversity or something like that? Maybe there was we didn't have a team loss, but maybe there was something on the field where we considered it kind of be a setback or whatnot, where we had to, kind of respond, and how we responded in that moment, which kind of really set the stage for the rest of the year.
Well, to be honest, by the time we got to Shaw and played Shaw, like when I knew we were going to be really good. Especially just defensively, we had those guys back. I knew what kind of kids they were. When we really knocked Noonan around, and Noonan's always really good, and they're big and physical, and we kind of overpowered them and just looked a lot better than them. And then when we did that to Shaw, that second game, because they came in here like they were confident. They had dominated that region, and we were coming into their region. And after that night, I knew we would have to screw it up. Like I knew that we weren't going to give up very many points, and I had a lot of confidence in our offense and kicking game. We were really good in all three phases that year. So to me, it wasn't like a big moment. We hit that lull about 3 or 4 weeks. A big thing too is that as a coach, when you're better than people, is those 4 weeks you play somebody where you're a lot better than somebody. Like, do you continue to improve? And I've been on some where we didn't. But that group, they continued to, we would come out and dominate a bad opponent. I mean, just maul them. And during the week, it was no letdown. You knew when it was a big game, there was a little different edge. But those guys, so there wasn't really a moment. But like I say, after the Shaw, I kind of knew, hey, I think we're for real.
Coach, what about for you? I know going into the playoffs, we sit there and we're matched up against Perry in the first round at home, and things didn't quite go our way. It seems like I remember my mom, she put together a scrapbook for me later on before she passed, and that Perry game, there's this one picture I think that John Strother had put on Facebook and on our Facebook page at the time, and it was a picture of a flag on the ground. We had so many, I don't know how many penalties we had that game, and then DeMario Ford gets ejected from that game, so we're going to miss him against Cripps County in the second round. Like going into the playoffs, that particular game, and almost kind of the mindset that it could have kind of, pushed into us moving forward in the playoffs. Is there something like that for you where you kind of looked at it and said, not that we have to overcome this, but this was a bit of a challenge and we did get past it?
Well, one thing is, like you say, the culture was really good, but, the thing we had to overcome, part of is like, we taught those kids how to watch film.
Right.
So we couldn't tell them. My dad said when he coached back in the day, there was no film. So they didn't even have newspaper. They didn't know how good the other team. They'd make lies, say, "Hey, they're undefeated," But our guys would watch film, and they were like, "You can't."
Now
tell me
you got
these guys are
social
good."
media,
Oh, yeah.
so they know everything. You can't
But
lie.
seriously, so we were, we had to be honest with them and say, "Hey, this, right? They're not good, but you know what? That's not going to be who's going to be in the dome when we get there. They're not going to be there. I promise you. Somebody's better." And then we end up winning 37-0 in the dome. So kind of was, but. DeMario's deal was really, I can say it now because I guess Georgia High School can go back and do anything to me, but really a bad call. It was bad officiating. It's like the first punt of the game. He gets it, gets tackled, jumps up, guy pushes him, he pushes him back, and they throw him out of the game, And I spent about 5 hours the next day trying to get that overturned, but it didn't happen. But it just triggered me to think, though, that I can't remember if it was the spring or the summer. Montoya Young, who also played receiver for us and was a really good baseball player for Donnie. And he decided he wasn't going to play football. And I had to talk him into playing football. So Mario doesn't play second round of the playoffs, and Montoya catches 3 touchdown passes. I'll never forget that third when he came off and said, "You still want to quit playing football?" And he had the biggest smile on his face, and he had a great mom that really supported him. And that was fun time to see him do that, And like I say, Marshall Shepard, we probably hadn't said his name enough because he was, that Noonan game, he came out, nobody knew who he was. And I think he had 200 yards on very few carries, He just, he was, his brother Buck was really fast.
No doubt.
He was faster,
Yep. All right, so just kind of a side note here to get a little bit, kind of lighten it a little bit. What about pregame stuff? I know, Coach, you are always very meticulous about being in schedule stuff. We'd walk in on Monday, we'd have all of our stuff on our desk, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday stuff, and then what all that would look like. But
were y'all superstitious? Like, do you have a superstition? Do you have to eat like?
Indeed,
I don't.
Come on, Coach. Like
no socks.
Don't do as I do. Right?
Yeah.
Coach got me. No,
he had to eat a Reese's cup and a Dr. Pepper every morning. That was his superstition.
Yeah. That's true.
I'm not gonna say superstitious, but we did have routines. How about that? You know what I mean? Like we, Thursday night, my family ate with Marsh Jones and his family across the street. Friday mornings, my wife and my 2 kids, we went to breakfast at Arby's, where Justin Patterson's aunt was the manager up there. So we did things like that, and I was real anal about times, and we were going to stay on schedule. And we did have one thing. I didn't even think about this. It didn't work though. My son Chaz, who's coaching up in Kentucky now, and he called me on the way to the game, and he had forgot his belt. I said, "Well, just use one of the players' belts, And he said, "Yeah, I didn't think about that." I said, "Chaz, I'll be honest with you. I never did it on purpose, but I don't think I ever forgot my belt that we didn't win." I said, "It's maybe a good sign for you."
Yeah.
Of course, that night later on, he said the belt didn't work. They got beat.
They got beat bad.
I couldn't do it intentionally. But that was one thing when that happened. And there was a white hat, and I wish I knew this guy's name. We never had him except in semifinals at the Dome or state championship games. And I never lost a game when he was a white hat, And it was a deal where we never mentioned it, but we'd see him, and I go, "Man, I'm glad to see you." And he just kind of laugh and go back to business, And I would love to be able to find his name because that was kind of a special relationship,
Coach Branch, you didn't have any superstitions or anything?
No, I was kind of routine based. You might.
I know.
You might have some things that
I'm not
maybe
go there with
that maybe I did. That was against the grain a little bit, but I'm a little bit like Steve, routine based, and as a defensive staff, we had the same routine after the game, same radio station.
Same radio station. Go to Checkers, get their 2 chili cheese dog. Yeah, I know all
Big
that stuff before.
Buford.
That's right.
We had all those things, And
it's not weird if it works.
That's
Like,
right.
That's
what
Or
I
even
mean.
during the game, during pregame warm-ups, Coach Branch and I had to throw together, warm up together, kind of thing. I mean, it was always what we did.
Yeah.
I would always go around and talk to Corey Gerald. I had a specific question that I asked him before every game until he graduated, obviously, and that's.
I'd
he would
be
always
anxious
answer
to
it the
hear
same
his
way.
answer.
He would always answer it the same way. But I mean, I ask him that every single game, and
It didn't have any profanity.
no,
in
it didn't, Coach. It didn't. It didn't. So
Y'all were doing that, and I was walking around trying not to throw
I
up.
know. I know.
And everybody was trying to stay away from
Well,
it.
we always used to look out for an onside kick.
That's right. No, that was right. The onside kick. Hey,
Every
watch
time
onside,
we'd say, watch onside, we'd pass
roll
it
it down.
down and
That's
then
right.
back to us. That was our
That's
little
right.
defensive routine.
Conrad Nix.
I
Conrad
saw,
Nix.
yeah. I saw Paul the other week at the Trinity Christian game, and he said, "Watch onside, watch onside."
Hey,
So-
he texted me last year. I'm at home on a Friday night. LaGrange was open. I get a text, and it's like 7:31 or 7:29, something like that. It's game time, and it's Paul Pick, and it says, "Watch your onside." And I said, "Are they not playing?" And I looked it up, and they had a game. So he texted me like right on the sideline. I texted him back, "Watch your onside."
right.
I mean, and that just speaks to like the legacy of that the program during those years, particularly that coaching staff together, and you know, a lot of players, former players, are going to listen to this, hopefully watch it, and they're going to have these memories about the bond that all this had for them. And so, Jamie, as principal now of LaGrange High School, what do you take away from your time with these coaches and these players, particularly in 2004, but early 2000s, and how's that built into your leadership now as principal?
Well, the first thing, you know, for me is I had, you know, a couple of great mentors, you know, that I was a young guy. I mean, I just getting out of college, you know, just graduated from Auburn. I did my internship here at LaGrange High School and was hired as a teacher. And then, you know, Coach Pardue took a chance on me, bringing me onto the staff, you know, in
He
2000.
did ask my opinion, by the way.
Oh, he know it?
I could have shot you down. He
Oh,
did
he
ask
asked
my
the opinion? Okay. Well, I appreciate you didn't
I'll
not
tell
shoot
you,
me.
I tell you, who told me to hire you
Who's that?
was Amon Tinker.
Okay.
So he was in the history department,
Right,
I guess,
right.
with you, you know, and everything. And he said, "There's a guy here who wants to coach." And I said, "Well, tell him come talk to me, you know."
Yeah. Yeah, Coach Tinker and I talked a good bit about social studies stuff, so and football and all. So, but you know, I grew up around a football community, being, you know, raised in Colquitt County, and you know, so when I got here, you know, it was a no-brainer. If there was ever an opportunity for me to be a part of that program, I wanted to be a part of it. Coach Pardue, like I said, took a chance on me and gave me an opportunity, and then when I made it to the varsity staff that next year, you know, and being able to coach outside linebackers, every opportunity that I had to sit down with, you know, Coach Branch or even David Pleasance, you know, he's always wanting to teach somebody something, who was the outside linebackers coach. Like
Whether you want to be taught or not.
whether I wanted it or not, you know. So
He knows a lot.
but you know, I took all that in, and I tried to, you know, I considered myself to be a really good teacher. So, and Coach Pardue, you know, he told me, he said, your best teachers are your best coaches.
Right.
And, you know, so you know your content. And he says, look, no matter what happens, even if you get it wrong, you're always going to know more than them. We can fix anything, right? So, I took that, and I just, you know, I tried to prepare the best I could, watching film with my guys, but then watching the guys that were ahead of me and just tried to emulate that as much as I could. But then at the same time, knowing that, you know, as a leader in this building now and the principal here, like, I love athletics. I love sports. And I wanted to be a guy that from my office was going to, you know, support academics in this school, but I was also going to do everything I can, or am going to do everything I can to support athletics, because it means so much to me being a part of it. I know how much time and effort that it takes to be great at something, and seeing what that looks like, you know, ultimately at the end of a season, being able to know when your last game is. You know, we talked about running hundreds at the end of every practice, and, you know, we would start with 15, and then every week we would take one away. And, you know, coaches, his message was always the same, like, you know when your last 100 is, know when your last week is, that we're going to practice. Don't let somebody else decide that for you. So it's really the idea of, you know, when I was being interviewed for that job, and it was, you know, grit kept coming to my mind, the idea of greatness requires intentional toughness. Like, there's going to be times that are really tough, but if you're intentional about your actions and about your words and your work dedication to things, that, you know, those obstacles and things like that are just, you know, mere stepping stones into the ultimate outcome that you're trying to achieve. So when I talk to the kids here, and I talk to players, those are the kind of things that I try to instill. And it was because of watching the people that were ahead of me and took me as a young coach and a young educator, and really just kind of helped me learn the ropes of that. So,
Coach Branch, Coach Pardue, as you watch the program now and where we're at here in the beginning part of the season, going to the semifinals last year, and what kind of advice can you give from your time in coaching the football program to Matt or to the players, or what would be your words to them?
you know, I don't give any advice unless I'm asked. You know,
Sure.
I
do.
I don't want to.
I give it to Coach Crocker every now and then.
There you go.
I mean, I don't want to be that guy.
Sure.
You know what I mean, I'm like talking about intentional. I'm intentionally try not to get into the
Yeah.
way. You know, but I respect Matt unbelievable. If I could pick any coach in the state to be our head coach, I'd pick Matt Napier. And I truly mean that, not just what he does on the field, but off the field. I think he's a great play caller. He runs a really good program. But there's one thing I would like to comment on that Jamie brought it up. I don't believe in coincidences. I really don't. You know, I think God has a reason for everything. And I tell somebody, our staff got built so good. And I could wish I was like, man, when I was young coach, I had this plan. I wanted it like this. But we had coaches in almost every area, you know,
of the building.
the building. You know, we had a math teacher,
Right.
we had English teacher, Todd Harrington, receiver coach,
Yep.
called English. You know, with history teachers, guidance counselor, in school suspension. You know, obviously in the gym PE. So I think that helps a lot because, like, you know, you and I are teaching beside each other, and you may not feel comfortable going to the head coach about
Right.
some kid that's not really doing anything bad, but
Yeah.
you can say it's not going the right way. Well, you'll tell me between classes, you know,
Yeah.
then I'll take care of it. If not, I'll let the head coach know. You
Yeah.
know, so I think that's something we kind of stumbled into. That when I look back on it, it's a great
It's a
model
big
to
deal.
have. If you know, it's hard enough to find good coaches, you know, but we, you know, what helped us here at LaGrange, and I'm sure Jamie does the same thing now. You know, Mr. Cole and Mr. McCoy, they both knew that we're looking for the same type people. I don't want some slap that's not going to do a good job in the classroom because they're
Yeah.
probably not going to do a good job on the football field. Like
Yeah.
Jamie said, you want good teachers. They're going to teach everything they do. And I think David Pleasance is an unbelievable example of that. He's the most tedious offensive line coach I've ever been around, and he's an unbelievable economics teacher.
Right.
You know, I remember my son had him, and Pam said, "Hey, things to do." I said, "He's going to make an A."
He has no choice.
Yeah, that's what I said. He has no choice but to make an A. He's going to
Right.
make him make an A. You know,
Right.
he'll work him. And David doesn't get the credit he deserves in those teams. You know, David was a quarterback coach here in '91 and came back in '02, coached the outside linebackers. And then when Jamie came and took over there, he went to offensive line and wasn't an offensive line coach, you know, and has made himself into, I think, arguably the best in the state of Georgia. You know, I mean, he just and the thing I always appreciate about David was, like Jamie said, we played with smaller kids. You know,
Yeah.
we didn't have those traditional looking guys, but he never complained about it. You know, he never complained. He just kept repping them and as he's doing today still. I think that's a big part of LaGrange's success, the job he's doing on the offensive line with them.
Right. If I could take and switch gears for a second and go over to Kevin Eckelberry. Kevin, thank you for being here and being patient when we get to you. So from the standpoint of media coverage, I mean, I know you get to see a lot of Georgia high school football with the schools that you cover and the different programs over the years and coaching styles and players and things like that. But go back to 2004 and this team for you and what it was like covering those games, the players, the atmospheres. We would be at Callaway Stadium and then other stadiums. And then if they had any moments throughout the course of the year, whether it be regular season or playoffs, that just stuck out in your mind that just made that season memorable for you.
It was an unreal season. First of all, I came here in 2002, which was an awesome time to come here, by the way, coming on the heels of the 2001 championship. Some of my favorite times were honestly just coming over to LaGrange, just sitting in the office, talking to Coach Pardue, talking to Coach Branch, just sitting here now, just listening to them talk football. I can't get enough of it, to be honest. And just incredible coaching staffs. One thing that always stood out to me too, I know that's kind of unrelated, but it was such a family atmosphere over there. I know a lot of the coaches had young kids, and it was always such a welcoming atmosphere over there. As I know the hours that coaches put in, it's unreal. I mean, it's a never-ending day sometimes, and I just thought that was always such a cool thing. Said, yeah, these guys, they're laser committed to football, but family was always so important as well. And I'm sure the players saw that as well. You know, they saw that, football is important, but it's not everything. But going back to that 04 team, I've had the good fortune to cover some state championship teams over my career. I know I was in Cartersville, 1999. They won a state title with Ronnie Brown, who's still probably
Pretty good running back.
the best high school player I've ever covered. He was that sensational. Obviously, the LaGrange teams, Callaway most recently in 2020. But to me, that 04 team, there's no team close to it. Just obviously the defense was, I know they got they got upset when they gave up points. It wasn't that team. It wasn't just about winning games. They wanted to, obviously, but they wanted to just absolutely destroy the opponents, and they didn't give up many points. I know it was just absolute ferocious competitors on that team. I think I remember Coach Branch telling me once that sometimes those defensive guys in practice, you had to get them to maybe dial it back a little bit sometimes.
We took off
Yeah.
bad.
Yeah. So again, it's just I remember coming into that season, it's kind of hard when it's like you're expected to win,
Right.
and if you don't, it's a disappointment. It doesn't matter how good you are. It's not easy to win the state titles. There's a lot of good teams out there. A lot of good teams. I remember coming into the season, I thought LaGrange was going to end up playing Peach County again at some point, and they got upset by somebody. I can't
They
There was a
ended up
situation
having a
that
fight.
happened. They
Yeah,
had a
got in
fight.
MLK,
and
they
had a
had a-
bunch
yeah.
of
Okay.
Darby County. I think
Yeah.
Darby them got in a fight.
Okay, wow.
They had like 7 guys get kicked out and had to miss the next game.
Right.
But that's again,
It was
that's
kind of like we were making a beeline for each other.
that
Right.
again. That's something you can't take that into account. You could have injuries, and
Right.
obviously Demario, you get players suspended, but that team again, just obviously they were talented, so incredibly well coached. I mean, you talked about that coaching staff, and one of the things I always admired about Coach Pardue and other great head coaches have the same thing, is they really trust the people that work for them. They're not micromanagers. They say, this is your job. I'm not going to be looking over your shoulder all the time. Sometimes, obviously, but just it was kind of the perfect storm, and man, it came together. And I know you're going to talk about that championship game at some point, but that was so much fun. It was at Callaway Stadium, which was such a blast, and it was also the last game on grass, which was really cool. I remember
Right.
after that game watching players scooping up the grass, but I know it's kind of a long-winded answer, but yeah, that was absolutely incredible team, and man, I had so much fun covering that team, and kind of miss those days too, because back then you actually had to put out a newspaper every morning, so I know people were picking that up to look at it.
And I want to
Yeah.
thank you, Kevin. I probably
Aw.
never did enough. But seriously, I say Kevin would come in, and I never felt like I was being interviewed. We'd sit around and talk for 20, 30 minutes. Next night, you said, I'd get home that night, I'd read the paper and go, like, I'm not really that smart. That sounds a lot better than what I probably said, But he did. He's like, we had so many people from sporting goods salesmen, people that became part, doctors and, that did so much for our football team that just was amazing, after we'd been here that long. We had, a guy told me one time, said, you'll never know, it takes about 7 or 8 years to find, you won't know everything, but you'll know who to go to, and by that time we were there,
Right. So speaking of that last game, that state championship game against Washington County here, you're right, Kevin. It was the last game at Callaway Stadium on natural turf for us and anybody, and to end it that way. But then just, I guess going into that game and then knowing those kinds of things, knowing how the season had progressed, and we talked about, defensively watching film and knowing what we wanted to do and the checks that we put into certain formations, like we knew that we had them like kind of where we wanted them for that matter. And then offensively, whatever coaching them had, we never really talked about any of, what have y'all got going on your side versus us. They did their thing and we did our thing. But just,
I did.
Oh, okay, I know.
But we could talk for 5 minutes and I know y'all's whole
You're
game
right.
plan because
Right.
we
So
talk so much on the same wavelength. I
Right.
didn't have to talk to him longer. I'd see somebody practice. What's
But-
that? He'd
but
tell
just
me real quick.
ultimately as we kind of wrap things up here today, but just ultimately what that game meant, that just kind of put the feather in the cap on that particular year for that team, that 04 season, that 04 team, those seniors that were walking off that field, for the last time, but then even those that were coming back, to continue their high school tenure and, what that might mean for them in 05. But just, if you don't mind, talk about that for just 1 second, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, well, real quick, we need to mention David Traylor. He probably didn't. Another very unsung person that I've ever known in my life. He's got no ego, nothing. He just wants the Grangers to win every game, and I valued his relationship. For me as a head coach, being down on the field when all the bullets are flying, things are going crazy, to have somebody like David and Donnie up top.
Right.
to be in the calm and help me, give me suggestions on things, was really special. And then the other guy was Thomas Crocker. Croc did, from dating myself, but MASH, the movie Radar, the guy would tell him to do something, I already did it. That's kind of the way Croc was with me. He was one step ahead of me most time, but I really appreciate everything he did behind the scenes that people didn't see over in the gym. He helped so much. But yeah, that game was special. And I'll be honest with you, I don't remember a lot about that game. In my head, I really don't remember. I know I didn't think they could score against us, and they wouldn't have if something didn't happen crazy late. It got, the referees lost the game a little bit there, and but it was just a dominating performance. We had played them the year before, Washington County in the Dome, and really that game probably helped us a lot that year because if you remember, we played on Saturday.
Yeah.
In the Dome, so we gave the kids off Monday. I wanted to be a regular week, and we worked Sunday and Monday prepping, the coaches did, and so we were way ahead. So I remember we got through the practice on Tuesday and still staying. I said, look, everybody go home. Sent all the coaches home after the kids were gone. And next morning I come back in, I got a stack of paper about that high on my desk. And Pleasance had gone home, ate, took a shower, came back and watched all 12 films we had again. He had 7 pages. He had fake punts. He had everything on there. But he really understood how they fit and everything because they were a well-coached team, and we actually used that against them, and a bunch of counter plays. But I think that helped us that next year, And what's ironic thing about that is Rick Tomlin was the head coach there. Now my daughter's a Tomlin. Her husband is a second cousin to him. So
Gotcha.
Didn't know, obviously, anything about that relationship at the time. But I always had a lot of respect for Rick, And when you play somebody in the state championship, it kind of gives you a relationship you keep forever. Rance Gillespie and I are really good friends, I think, because of our games, But no, that's again, it capped just an unbelievable season. We had tried so hard to repeat, from 01 to 02 and then 03 to 04, we were able to do that, And again, looking back on that whole run right there, and the game we didn't mention is, 2000. I thought we had a chance at Swainsboro in the second round. And it was just a mud bath. That's one reason we started pushing for that turf, But that was a 6-0. They go on and win the state championship, And then in 02, Screven beats us. They go on and cakewalk to the state championship. But I still wasn't sure if we had won in 02, if we'd have won in 03. I may have given us a little something there. So I'll never say anything like that. But it was fun time, like you say, fun group of guys. Everything from, you brought up John Strother, I'd be getting phone calls. Hey, when the highlights going to be on?
Right.
They wanted them after the game, the highlights, and him and Jeff Buchanan. Jeff did so many things for us, And, Mike Pauley, the late Ron Pauley, driving our buses, and just Golden Corral, eating over there. I mean, when you forget, that's why you hate to start thanking people because there's so many people out there, especially when it's 20 years later, But it definitely does take a whole community to winning championships are hard. People say that they won't. I always tell our guys every year, I think there's 4 or 5 teams good enough to win it. Right. Who's going to get the breaks? Who's going to stay healthy? That ball's not round. They don't bounce the same way, So I know I rambled there.
That's
I'm not sure I answered your question.
Yeah, you did.
Coach Branch, any final thoughts on that season, that
no,
team?
he covered. No, just I do want to say about that particular game. We were talking before we got on air about how we met at my house at the defensive staff and watched the deal. It was kind of what's fun, what reminds or comes to mind when I think of that state championship is I've never had a better feeling for what they do and what we're gonna do. Like I felt like, hey, they're gonna be in trouble. I mean, I felt really confident. Like I say, the beauty of coaching at LaGrange, you don't worry about what somebody else is doing. But I didn't worry about our offense. We do what we're supposed, our job, and trust them, and they do the same. But you remember that day, it was like while that game was going on, we were drawing it up and going, hey, we can check this when they line up in this.
Right.
And, if they want to get out and do something crazy, we'll adjust. But we're gonna take away what they do. And a little fact that I don't know if you remember or not, but in 2003, when we played them in the Dome, they either go on down or six.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't, our guys, we did a lot of slanting and moving, and we couldn't practice it well. Like it would screw up practice when our scout team would try to go on some some brain surgeon would jump off sides and screw us up, eat up our time and all that. So we just kind of practiced as regular. We got in that game and we were, they were really good and we were flat-footed. That was a bloodbath. We did win. Well, that next year I said, we're going to practice down and 6. And I said, I don't care if the offense, they're going to figure out how to do it. And the credit to our offensive staff, they got that scout team to do a great job. And, man, we teed off. We were flying around, and the kids did great. It was a culmination of a bunch of kids just like they were. They hey, give us the information. We'll go get it done. And the biggest thing is don't get anybody hurt between game 14 and 15,
right.
and they'll be ready to roll. Right. So that they were really good.
Right. Well, Coach Pardue, Coach Branch, Kevin, I want to thank you guys for coming out today and just kind of reminiscing and talking about that 2004 team. But not only that, just LaGrange High School football and the program itself and your time here, whatever your role was as the head coach and the leader of that program, setting the stage for the things that were to come during your tenure here. But not only that, afterwards, and then Coach Branch still being here as a part of athletics here at LaGrange High School and our head baseball coach. Then Kevin, all your time covering, all those games and then still the things that you do here for all of our sports and athletic programs here in Troup County. So we appreciate all that. So, guys, just in case you don't know, this Friday night we will be playing Spalding County at Callaway Stadium. Please come out. The 2005 class will be celebrating their 20-year anniversary, which means those seniors from that 2004 team will be there, and we will honor them at halftime. So if you will, please come out, support the Grangers, and we look forward to talking to you next time on our next episode of Grainger Talk. And as always, go Grangers.